Good evening. Thank you for being here tonight. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Laura Kasner, and I am a member here at Liberty Valley Church. The documentary that you are about to watch, called An Inconvenient Study, unearths the explosive 2016 Henry Ford Health pro-vaccine study, a clandestine comparison of health outcomes between vaccinated and unvaccinated children, originally commissioned to silence skeptics, but buried when its findings threatened the sacred vaccine dogma. George, can I have the next slide, please? Anti-vaxxer. Sure you've all heard the word. Just 5 short years ago, I would have used this derogatory term myself. That is until I learned that anti-vaxxers are rarely born. They're made when they themselves, someone they know, or when their precious child has been injured by a vaccine. God has certainly humbled me. So some of you may have realized that Dr. Sherry Tenpenny is going to be here. And she's going to be our expert in answering any questions that you may have this evening. And we hope to answer as many as possible. I don't want to keep everybody here really late. It's already a little bit late that we get started. It's kind of a thing here at Liberty Valley. We usually start like about 10 minutes after or so. Right, Jeff?
Let's keep it real.
Dr. Sherry Tenpenny is an osteopathic medical doctor, board certified in osteopathic medicine with a proficiency certification in integrative medicine. She was previously board certified in emergency medicine when she worked for 12 years as a full-time emergency medicine physician and served as the director of a Level 2 trauma center. Dr. Tenpenny's authority in the field of vaccines is unparalleled. Over the last 25 years, she has invested more than 50,000 hours of research and writing time to expose problems associated with vaccines. She's a regular guest on many media platforms, sharing her highly researched information and educating on the importance of informed vaccine decisions. To maximize the time that Dr. Tenpenny can devote to Q&A, please write your questions on the 4x6 index card that you've been provided, and you may pass them toward the center aisle or the end of the aisles. There's some gift bags placed there that you can put them in, and we'll collect them at the end of the film. Before we start this 80-minute film, I'd like Pastor Jeff Tauring to come up here and to say the invocation.
Well, let's pray together. Our gracious God and Father, again, we appreciate always the days that you have for us. We're reminded of the words of Moses, teach me to number my days. We know they are numbered, but we need to learn that they're precious, each one, and that as the days pass and the calendars pass, the months, days, the years, that those are written in the chronicles of heaven. And there's things in this world that are definitely opposed to us, opposed to you. As you said in John chapter 17, the world hates you. And to be able to give a poison into a child's veins, knowing the risk, almost Russian roulette. We would ask that you would give wisdom, as you told us to ask, and you'll give it liberally. And so we do. And even as we show this film, we ask that you would not only let us see it here, but then we can have conversation with other people outside the walls. And we'll thank you for it in Jesus' name. Amen.
Children struggling every day with ADHD?
Scott's allergies made it hard to keep up with his friends.
Allergic reactions from accidental food exposure.
Moderate to severe eczema.
Plaque psoriasis. Rheumatoid arthritis.
Food allergies.
Allergies.
Seizure.
Asthma.
Eczema.
IBS.
Lupus.
We are now the sickest country in the world.
The health of American children is in crisis.
A huge rise in chronic conditions in kids 17 and under.
More than 40% of American children now have at least one chronic health condition.
Autoimmune diseases like rheumatoid arthritis, juvenile diabetes, lupus, Crohn's disease, all this IBS.
I had eczema, asthma,
All it out.
allergies, stomach issues.
This is to me the one that gets me. Just a few decades ago, 1 in 10,000 children had autism. Today it's 1 in 31.
ADD, ADHD, speech-delay, language delay, tics, Tourette syndrome, narcolepsy, sleep disorders, ASD, autism.
But there's no way in the world that these kind of rapid increases in the incidence of disease could be genetic. Genetic change takes generations, centuries to play out.
What's really causing our kids of this generation to be so chronically sick?
What the heck is happening?
America is the sickest nation in the industrialized world. It is now believed that over 54% of our kids have a chronic disease, either a neurological disorder or an autoimmune disease. That's up from only 12.8% back in the 1980s. In roughly 40 years, we have seen the greatest decline in human health ever recorded. What if I told you there is a study that could shed light on this chronic disease epidemic, but no major medical institution seemed willing to do it? What if I told you there was one scientist brave enough to conduct this study?
How you doing, Mark? Good to see you. Hey, nice to see you. Absolutely. Good.
What if I told you that when the study was finished, that scientist was too afraid to publish it? What would you do? Maybe you would do what I did. I got hidden cameras and recording equipment, and I went to ask him why.
Thank you. You're very welcome. Cool. Have you all dined with us before?
I want to show you a video.
Okay.
Curious of what your reaction to this.
Okay. Just hit play here.
Yeah. Go ahead and press play there.
What was the most shocking thing? Because I mean, I know what I've seen.
No, I thought it was important. It's important information because of it did show a difference between the groups.
We have some serious issues.
No, I actually agree with that.
If I can't get this study out, then what hope is there for every kid in the future?
I don't want to say it's not the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do, but I just don't want to.
I mean, obviously, really emotional.
Sick. It's really sick.
Publishing something like that, might as well retire. I'd be finished.
So who was that guy?
Zervo's probably going to lose his job over this.
You know, I'm thinking before we get into the hidden cameras and the study and Dr. Zervos and all that, why don't we just take it all the way back to how this actually started? I've been a medical journalist for almost 20 years now. My first 10 years was at CBS, and the last 8 years or so I've had my internet news show called The High Wire. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. But the biggest change in my career happened when I produced a documentary about vaccinations called Vaxxed. And at the center of that documentary was a whistleblower from the CDC named Dr. William Thompson. He came forward in 2015 and said that they were committing scientific fraud on the vaccine safety studies. Well, that film blew up and became a worldwide sensation, mostly because we got so much bad press, starting with being kicked out of the Tribeca Film Festival.
The decision to run a controversial documentary about vaccines has Robert De Niro at the center of a big screen backlash.
Tonight, the film festival Robert De Niro started under fire, a controversial new film that many are characterizing as anti-vaccine.
I think the movie is something that people should see. There was a backlash which I haven't fully explored. I want to know the truth, and I'm not anti-vaccine. I want safe vaccines.
Vax producer Del Bigtree says canceling the screening amounts to a suppression of the truth.
I can't imagine what type of pressure came down that would make them pull a movie that they were obviously behind in the beginning.
The message from the medical community is clear.
This is one of those scientific questions that where science has provided an answer.
Vaxxed ended up being one of the most controversial documentaries in history. And because of that, there were lines down the block everywhere we went.
Look at this crowd behind me. Look at this line goes on and on and on.
In fact, the very first day we screened at Angelica Film Center in New York, I wanted to know why there's this giant line down the block. What are these people here for? Can every parent or someone, if you have a family member with autism, would you please stand up right now? I'd like to see. 3/4 of the room stood up. I remember feeling like the air just got sucked out of the room. I had no idea that there was this many people suffering from this issue. I ended up asking that question 3 screenings a day, 5 days a week for an entire year. And every single time, 3/4 of the room stood up. I realized I had stumbled on something absolutely massive.
Hello everybody, this is Jamie. Jamie's first.
Can you guys both tell us your names?
I'm Stephanie. And this is Zion.
After the screenings, parents of injured children were inspired to tell their own stories. We set up video cameras and started interviewing everybody that wanted to talk. And what I discovered is it wasn't just autism, and it wasn't just the MMR vaccine. There was an ocean of vaccine injury, and nobody was talking about it.
Doctor says, well, do you want the flu vaccine? I was like, might as well do it now.
I gave in. I did polio.
They gave her the Hep B vax. She got the 2-month shots.
Detail. The MMR vaccine.
By 10:30 that morning, she was arching her back, clenching her fists. I didn't think I was gonna cry.
That night, we were in the hospital with the 106-degree fever.
He began to projectile vomit. He began to this loud pitch scream.
Like that's when the blood curdling scream started. I did not lay down for 10 months straight because she would vomit and asphyxiate. She would vomit at night and she would lie there while she was asleep and she would choke on it.
When we had that vaccination, he lost all language.
He just stopped talking?
He wasn't talking. He didn't want to nurse.
He went to not talking at all. He was developing really well, except for motor skills.
He's got chronic allergies.
An eczema rash.
Food protein enterocolitis syndrome. She couldn't eat anything on the glycemic index that was too high.
GI symptoms. He started to have gut inflammation.
Chronic snoring.
Sleep apnea.
Seizure-like activity.
We woke up. She just...
She died in your arms?
Yeah.
I continued to vaccinate her and make her worse and make her sicker.
The guilt and it's so overwhelming.
They killed my daughter.
Clearly, this was a bigger issue than anybody realized. But there was one particular interview that we did that really changed my perspective forever.
Colton was a 13-year-old healthy, strong boy. He loved anything that has to do with an adrenaline rush. Motocross was his passion. The doctor says, hey, he's the age that you should get the HPV vaccine. I said, okay. So he was administered the vaccine. And then this is the last day he got to ride that big boy bike. And that day he came home, he was starting to feel nauseous, really sore neck. He still didn't want to get out of bed. I just thought, man, you're just really weak and exhausted. And that evening, when he sat up to take a drink of water, he just flopped back and his head just hit the pillow, and I went, Colton, are you going paralyzed? They immediately took him down to Primary Children's Hospital in Salt Lake. Original diagnosis was transverse myelitis. When the doctor came out and asked me, has he been sick? I said, no, he hasn't been sick. He had the HPV vaccine on February 1st, and they went, oh, well, we'll be reporting that to VARS.
It does suck, like, not being able to play sports anymore. Now I have to sit on the sideline, just watch everybody. You gotta do your research, like, you can't just trust a doctor anymore. Do your own ways to find out what's best for you.
Unfortunately, Colton ended up taking his life in 2018 because he believed he'd become too much of a burden on his family. But the thing I remember about standing there and watching that interview taking place, my co-producer, Polly Tommy, was doing the interview, was this box that was hanging on his side that was breathing for him. And it went through a tube that was going through a hole in his throat. And he literally had to wait for it to fill his lungs with air before he could answer a question. So he'd go, and then he would start answering the question until he ran out of air. I thought about all of the people that accuse these so-called anti-vaxxers of bringing back polio or the iron lung.
Once vaccination rates fall, you're going to have a lot of people getting sick and a lot of children paralyzed for the rest of their life with polio.
I thought, he's wearing an iron lung. You're not laying in a metal tube anymore. They've reduced it down to a box that hangs on your side and a hose that goes to your throat. But in this case, he wasn't paralyzed because he had polio. He wasn't paralyzed because he didn't vaccinate. He was paralyzed by the Gardasil HPV vaccine.
I chose to get my daughter vaccinated because I want her to be one less woman affected by cervical cancer.
One less. Gardasil.
Then I went home and started looking up all of the inserts, the warning labels that are wrapped around all of the childhood vaccines, and most of them say it right there in serious adverse events. Guillain-Barré syndrome, that's paralysis. Or transverse myelitis, paralysis. And I realized
polio vaccine is a success.
We didn't eradicate paralytic diseases with the vaccine program.
The vaccine works.
We're causing paralytic diseases with our vaccine program. So as we traveled the country, some parents would come up and say, I'm about to have a baby. I'm definitely not going to get the MMR vaccine because your movie shows that that one's dangerous. But what about the other 16 vaccines that are given in 72 doses by the time my child's 18? And I'd say, I only have anecdotal evidence from the thousands of interviews I've done that not a single childhood vaccine is safe. But that's not scientific. I wanted something better. I wanted to get to the bottom of this. So I started a nonprofit called the Informed Consent Action Network.
Based on the Nuremberg Code's right to voluntary consent,
the German Air Force,
the ethical principle globally agreed upon in the wake of the Nazi doctors' horrifying human experiments,
of inmates in concentration camps for experimental purposes,
where it states the voluntary consent of the human subject is absolutely essential, and there should be no element of force, fraud, deceit, duress, or overreaching or other ulterior form of constraint or coercion.
What I wanted to do was investigate the entire vaccine program. I was really focused on one thing. We hear that vaccines are safe and effective. But before we even worry about if they're effective, how did we determine they're safe? We started looking at all the science around the world, but we hit a big roadblock. You can't sue a manufacturer of a vaccine. It's one of the only products in America that has what they call liability protection. The reason is because of a law that was passed in 1986 by the US government. The pharmaceutical industry basically blackmailed the government, and they said, we are losing so much money from lawsuits for death and injury from our vaccines, we can't make a profit.
Studies have shown that the whooping cough or pertussis vaccine causes brain damage. The controversy isn't really over the fact that it happens, but how often it happens.
And they said, if you want us to continue making vaccines, you're going to have to take on the liability. And our government agreed to that. If you want to sue or you want to get any information outside of what's publicly known, you're going to have to sue the government. And that's when I realized I need a constitutional attorney. And I found a guy named Aaron Siri.
Mr. Siri, you're not a medical doctor, are you?
No, sir.
And you're not an immunologist or biologist or any kind of...
Or vaccinologists, no, but I depose them regularly, including the world's leading ones with regards to vaccines, and I have to make my claims based on actual evidence when I go to court with regards to vaccines. I don't get to rely on titles.
Okay.
He had a genius way forward. We're going to sue the government agencies, HHS, FDA, NIH, and we started winning. And what did we prove in those lawsuits? That the entire science behind vaccine safety was nothing but a complete fraud.
Doctors used to listen to parents. When their parents came in and said, hey, my kid is suffering with this condition, has this issue, doctors listened to them. But when parents started coming in and saying, my kid went in and got a vaccine and then started having X issue, that's when doctors stopped listening.
Hi, how you doing? We have triplets, 2 boys and a girl, Richie, Robbie, and Claire. Every day in our life was a party. Every single day they were smiling and laughing and looking at each other, engaging in each other. On June 25th, 2007, we brought them in for the pneumococcal shot. My daughter still has the mark on her leg from the shot. She was the first one to get it, and she screamed and never really stopped screaming after that. But we continued. We didn't know. We did the boys as well. By noon, Claire shut completely off. It was as if she was blind and deaf, and all she did at that moment was stare at the ceiling fan. So that was at noon. We had the shot at 10 a.m. 2 o'clock, we watched Richie shut off. They lost all their reflexes. I'm an educational audiologist. I actually did the test for the stapedial reflex, which is a little muscle in the middle ear, just to see if a muscle they can't control was still working, and it didn't. The stapedial reflex dampens sound, so your ears don't hurt from a really loud sound, and both of them had no stapedial reflex. They stopped blinking, stopped yawning, stopped coughing, stopped sneezing.
The worst is when we saw the final one shut down. We were told it was genetic, and then we were told by geneticists that there's no possible way 3 children would shut off on the same day. So we had severe autism spectrum disorder for all 3 kids entering kindergarten. We have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars trying to recover them. The only person that we got back is Robbie, the one that was last to shut off. Richie can only say single, maybe 2 words together. Claire is still completely nonverbal, not potty trained, and Robbie is approaching grade level, but severe OCD.
Let me tell you what a day in our life is. So you got, say, a 6 or 7 or 8 year old child who's not potty trained, and at 2 or 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning they fill their diaper. Well, you assume that's pretty uncomfortable, so they take it off. Pretty soon it's all over them. It's all over the bed. In short order, it's all over me. It's all over her. I'm snapping at her. She's snapping at me. We're both snapping at the kid, who is the only innocent party in the whole scenario. And the one thing that's conspicuously absent from that scenario is anybody who told you that shot was safe. They're all asleep in their bed. They haven't got a problem in the world.
This one story of Richie, Robbie, and Claire puts an end to any discussion that autism is only caused by genetics. There is no genetic explanation that would turn 3 brothers and sisters off on the exact same day.
What you should do when there are widespread complaints that a product is causing a given harm is you should study it.
Vaccines should be tested like other medicines. They should be safety tested. And unfortunately, vaccines are not safety tested. Of the 72 vaccine doses now mandated, essentially mandated, they're recommended, but they're really mandated, for American children, none of them, not one, has ever been subject to a pre-licensing placebo-controlled trial.
Health and Human Services Secretary Robert Kennedy Jr. has been torn apart by mainstream media for saying that there's no placebo trials being done for vaccines. But he's right. It's exactly what we found in our lawsuits against the government. Not a single childhood vaccine is going through a double-blind, randomized, placebo-controlled trial prior to licensure. That's the gold standard of safety testing for all pharmaceutical products, but is being skipped for vaccines. In case you forgot how a double-blind, placebo-based trial worked as we discussed it back in high school science class, let me remind you. We break up a group of kids into two groups. One group is going to get the vaccine. The other group is going to get a placebo, which is a product that has no effect on the human body. When it comes to an injectable like vaccines, that is a saline injection. Then it's called double-blinded because both the scientists and the patients are blinded from knowing which one they got. Did they get the vaccine or did they get the placebo? This is so that the scientists will not manipulate the study in favor of the pharmaceutical industry that will stand to make a lot of money if this vaccine proves to be safe. Then we track these two groups for 2 to 5 years, sometimes as long as 10 years for a lot of drugs. And at the end of that study, we unblind both the patient and the scientist. So we look at both groups, the vaccinated and the placebo group, and we compare their health outcomes. Who had more cancer? Who had more diabetes or ADD, ADHD or autism or Tourette's or lupus or multiple sclerosis? All of these things that are currently skyrocketing in the United States of America. And if, when you compare them, they both turn out the same, there's the same amount of issues in the vaccinated group as is in the placebo group, then you know it's safe. You've established what we call a safety baseline. But if the vaccinated group has more issues than the placebo group, then we know it's not safe and it shouldn't be put on the market. Only one problem. Not a single vaccine on the childhood schedule has ever been through a double-blind, placebo-based trial. Therefore, they cannot say the vaccines are safe based on science.
Are all vaccine trials placebo-controlled?
No, and nor should they be. So, for example, when Prevnar 13, so Prevnar was a conjugate pneumococcal vaccine.
The FDA has approved a new pneumococcal vaccine.
It had to be tested in the phase 3 trial, and so the control group there was Prevnar 7 and had been shown to work.
It will replace Prevnar, which was effective against 7 serotypes.
You can't ask parents to put their children at risk of pneumococcal disease when there existed on the market at the time a vaccine to prevent that. And the World Health Organization has been very clear on this. That would have been considered an ethical trial.
Dr. Paul Offit's one of the big proponents of vaccinations, probably because he's made a vaccine and made a killing off of it, the rotavirus vaccines on the childhood schedule.
It doesn't matter whether I financially benefited or not.
He likes to go around and say, well, we can't always do placebo trials, especially if there's already a vaccine that covers that disease. So he'll use an example like Prevnar 13. Prevnar 13 in its safety trial was tested against Prevnar 7, the earlier version of the vaccine. And he'll say you cannot test Prevnar 13 against a saline placebo because it would be unethical. You'd be denying children access to a vaccine that is already on the market, and that's not fair to them. But what he leaves out is that Prevnar 7 was never tested against a saline placebo, so we don't know if it's safe. So we're testing one product we don't know the safety profile on with another product we don't know the safety profile on, and this is how the entire vaccine schedule works. I like to call this the whiskey study. Let me explain. Let's say there's a group of people that are complaining that whiskey is making people drunk and they're crashing their cars and people are getting killed. Now, in order to test does whiskey cause car accidents, you would set up a double-blind placebo trial. One group, the test group, would get the 10 shots of whiskey. The other group, the placebo group, would get 10 shots of water. And then we'd have them both drive on a driving course and see who has more accidents. It's obvious. But in this case, the whiskey company is the one doing the study. And what they say is, oh, we're going to do a placebo-based trial, but our placebo-based trial is not going to be water, it'll be vodka, another product already on the market. And so 10 people get the whiskey shots and 10 people get the vodka shots, and they had them all drive, and guess what? They had just as many car accidents. Therefore, whiskey does not cause car accidents because it didn't cause any more than the vodka did. And so to take this all the way to the end of Dr. Paul Offit's point, if vodka had ever been tested against 10 shots of water and there was no car accidents in the vodka group, then it would make sense to test the whiskey against the vodka. But we all know that study was never done, just like no vaccine placebo study was ever done. All you have to do is type in FDA licensed vaccines on your computer, and every vaccine that they give your child on the childhood schedule will appear there. And then you can click on any one you're interested in. Let's click on Recombavax HB. This is one of the hepatitis B vaccines they give your baby on the first day of life. Hello, welcome to the world. Gasp for your first breath, and here comes your first sexually transmitted disease. Now, go to vaccine insert. This is the insert or the warning label that is wrapped around the vaccine when it's delivered to your doctor. It has all kinds of information like what's in the vaccine, all the ingredients, side effects of the vaccine, but I want you to focus on section 6.1. This is where they talk about the clinical trial they relied upon to establish safety. It's always 6.1 on every single vaccine, so you can look at all of them. But in this one, you'll see that there was only 147 children in the entire trial.
And they were only monitored for 5 days after each dose.
5 days. So think about it. Would you take any drug that was only monitored for safety for 5 days? If your child dies on day 6, it wasn't captured by this trial. They'll say, we didn't see any deaths. If a child had autism 2 years later, or other autoimmune diseases or neurological disorders, things that take years to develop, they'll say, we didn't see any in our trial. This is why every drug we take goes through a multi-year safety trial. Most of your issues are going to take years to develop, and if your study isn't that long, you'll never, ever see them. We had an interesting opportunity to talk about this with Dr. Stanley Plotkin, who's considered to be the reigning godfather of our vaccine program.
Dr. Stan Plotkin.
Dr. Plotkin.
Virtually every country in the world is affected by his vaccines.
Like the rubella vaccine, the rotavirus vaccine, rabies.
He trained just a generation of scientists, including myself, to think like he thinks.
He developed the standard textbook for vaccines in 1988.
Bill Gates calls his book a Bible for vaccinologists.
I hope it's more accurate than the Bible.
In 2018, our attorney, Aaron Siri, had the opportunity to depose under oath Dr. Stanley Plotkin, and he asked him this exact question. Is a 5-day safety trial long enough to capture all of the side effects that people are complaining about from the hepatitis B vaccine?
Dr. Plotkin, this is the product, the manufacturer insert for Recombavax HB, correct?
Yes.
And the clinical trial experience would be found in section 6.1, correct? Correct? Dr. Plotkin?
Yes.
Okay. In section 6.1, when you look at the clinical trials that were done pre-licensure for Recombavax HB, how long does it say that safety was monitored after each dose?
Let's see. Uh, 5 days.
Okay. Is 5 days long enough to detect an autoimmune issue that arises after 5 days?
No.
Is 5 days long enough to detect any neurological disorder that arose from the vaccine after 5 days?
No.
There is no control group, correct?
It does not mention any control group, no.
No. If you turn to section 6.2, under the nervous system disorders, it states that there have been reports of Guillain-Barré syndrome, correct?
Yes.
As well as multiple sclerosis, exacerbation of multiple sclerosis, myelitis, including transverse myelitis, seizure, febrile seizure, peripheral neuropathy, including Bell's palsy, muscle weakness, hypothesia, and encephalitis, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now,
it says at the top, before you go on, these reports are required to be included because they have been reported to the authorities as happening after vaccination. That is not proof that the vaccine caused those reactions.
In order to establish whether it's causal between the vaccine and the condition, you need a randomized, placebo-controlled study. But
yes.
That was not done for this hepatitis B vaccine before licensure, was it?
No.
Okay.
Without a control group, if you're looking for a phenomenon occurring in the vaccine group, you cannot judge that phenomenon without having a control group.
Isn't it true that it would now be considered unethical to conduct such a study today?
It would be, yes, it would be ethically difficult.
So this is how the entire game is played. They don't do a safety placebo trial before the vaccine's licensed. Then when people start lining up with all of these serious side effects, you say, well, can you do a placebo-based trial now? And they'll say, no, it's unethical. So they won't do it before, they won't do it after there's injuries, and when they can't do a study, your doctor says to you, I haven't seen any studies that show that these injuries are being caused by the vaccine. Therefore, I'm going to assume they're safe.
Do you agree with the CDC's recommendation that babies receive a hepatitis B on the first day of life?
Yes.
You stated that hepatitis B doesn't cause encephalitis, right?
That's my opinion, yes.
But the IOM, after doing its review, determined it couldn't find science to support a causal determination one way or another. Correct?
Yes. But that means that they don't have evidence for the supposition.
That it either causes or doesn't cause.
Right.
They don't know.
They don't know because there aren't enough data. In the absence of data, my conclusion is that there's no proof that the causation exists.
So if there's no data to show that it causes or it doesn't cause,
yes.
Your supposition, is that I understand correctly?
Yes.
Is that it doesn't cause it?
That there's no proof that it does.
Okay, that's different than saying it doesn't cause it, correct?
Correct.
So let's be clear. Vaccine safety is not based on science and data. It's based on an assumption of safety. And that is the stalemate we find ourselves in. But there's one way out of it. Instead of doing a placebo-based study, you can do a retrospective study looking at people that have already made their choice, whether they're going to vaccinate or not. And then you just compare those groups, the ones that got the vaccines and the ones that decided not to vaccinate. We call that the vaccinated versus unvaccinated study. It's been done by a few independent scientists and institutes amongst small groups of children, but never by a major government agency or a major medical facility. The reason this study is important, I think, is illustrated by a study that was done in Guinea-Bissau, Africa, by a man named Dr. Peter Abe. He's one of the lead experts, he's pro-vaccine, and he develops vaccine programs for the third world. He had a DTP vaccine program he'd run 30 years ago in Guinea-Bissau, Africa, and recognized 30 years later, you know what, only half the children in the country got that vaccine and the other half didn't. I could do a perfect comparative study between the vaccinated and the unvaccinated. And when he did that study, the results blew his mind.
This is about vaccines. And I think it's important to recognize that no routine vaccine was tested for overall effect on mortality in randomized trials before being introduced. I guess most of you think that we know what our vaccines are doing. We don't. The program we are talking about at the time, the vaccine program, was introduced sort of in the late 70s after the success with the eradication of smallpox. WHO made sort of the first immunization program for the low-income countries. What comes out here, you had 2.3 times higher mortality if you are DTP vaccinated. And that is the most commonly used vaccine in the world. So the whooping cough vaccine or pertussis vaccine was associated with twofold higher mortality. You can have a vaccine which is fully protective against a specific disease, but associated with higher mortality. How is that possible?
After looking at this study, it was clear that the vaccine did protect against the diseases they were vaccinated for. The kids didn't die of diphtheria, tetanus, and pertussis. Only one problem. Once they looked at it, they were dying at 5 times the rate of all of these other issues. So it was clear that though it was protecting against these diseases, it was weakening their immune systems to all sorts of other problems. One of the other scientists on this study did a TED Talk on this.
In spite of being protected against 3 deadly diseases, the introduction of DTP was associated with increased overall mortality. children who received DTP vaccine had 5 times higher risk of dying than those who didn't. And this is just one example of many studies now done of DTP vaccine, and they all show the same. DTP vaccinated children have higher mortality than those who didn't get DTP. So it appears that DTP vaccine has negative non-specific effects. The protection against the 3 deadly diseases comes at a very high price, namely increased risk of dying. So, with the best of intentions, the use of DTP vaccine may kill more children than it saves. I know these results are extremely uncomfortable, and most people, including myself, just wish they weren't true. But this is what the data tells us.
That was just a study of one vaccine in a group of children. What if you studied children that were receiving not one vaccine, but between 72 and 100 vaccines by the time they're 18? Of course, I'm talking about the most vaccinated nation in the world, the United States of America.
Our federal health authorities actually paid the Institute of Medicine to look at the safety of the vaccine schedule as a whole. And the Institute of Medicine, after conducting that review, came back with a report in 2013. The report said no studies have compared the differences in health outcomes between entirely unimmunized populations of children and fully immunized children.
It's the CDC's responsibility to do those studies, and they've been ordered again and again and again to do them, and they have refused. But the Institute of Medicine has looked at the vaccine schedule and said in their 2011 report, there are over 150 injuries that are likely to be associated with vaccines that have never been studied.
Well, what did the CDC do after the Institute of Medicine issued that report?
Instead of doing the study, they ended up doing a study on how to do a vax versus unvax study.
It went and it paid a whole lot of money to issue a white paper on how to conduct that study comparing vaccinated versus unvaccinated kids. That white paper came out in 2015. Now, here we are in 2025, 10 years later. They've still never published that study. Now, have they never done the study? I can't tell you.
This is information that vaccine safety advocates want and have been asking for a long time, and I'm not sure why it hasn't been done.
This simple study would shut up every anti-vaxxer forever. I have to believe that they have done this study every way they possibly can, and they can't seem to figure out how to make it look like the vaccinated are healthier. But that's just my opinion, based on several other studies I've seen that did compare vaccinated to unvaccinated, but mainstream medicine says, well, the cohort was too small, or they poke holes in it saying it wasn't done by a major medical institution. So if we're ever going to get a vax versus unvaccinated study that people believe in, it's going to have to be done by highly credited scientists at a major medical institution who has a database big enough to do a thorough, robust investigation comparing the vaccinated to the unvaccinated.
As fate would have it, Dell met the head of infectious disease at Henry Ford Health System, Marcus Servos.
I'll never forget that meeting because you said something to me. You said, "I've watched your film. It's intriguing," but you said, "I'll never forget." You said, "You've been saying something. I watched your videos that I had an issue with." You said that they cannot say that vaccines are safe because they've never done the proper safety studies, and you said to me, "I actually researched that because I wanted to see if that was true," and you said, I'm sorry to have to report to you that you're actually right about that.
I say it
proper
now,
safety studies have not been done.
And to now too, it's same thing. I still say it now. The proper safety studies haven't been done.
So then I said to you, all right,
still true.
And you're like, I don't know what I'm doing here. I don't agree with you. I believe in vaccines. And I said, would you ever consider doing a vaccinated versus unvaccinated study? And you said I would do anything wherever the data is the data, right?
Yeah.
The first time I met with Dr. Servos, he agreed to do a vaccinated versus unvaccinated study. I mean, I was ecstatic. He was perfect. Ford Medical Center is one of the greatest research centers in the world, and Dr. Zervos is in the middle of being a hero for having just worked out the entire Flint, Michigan water crisis.
74 miles of large-diameter pipeline will stretch
For decades, Flint, one of the poorest cities in America, had bought its water from Detroit. Instead of staying on the Detroit water supply while the pipeline was being built, the city would temporarily get its water from the Flint River. That decision would force the city to activate an old water treatment plant.
Here's the plant.
This is what is coming out of the tap.
Water's brown, has a bad odor.
We cannot drink the water.
They soon became a breeding ground for Legionella, and people were getting sick.
The oxygen, you're on that all the time, or do you ever get to take it?
I'm on it all the time.
Yeah.
Her doctor, Marcus Zervos, had been treating a chronic skin infection that her weakened immune system couldn't control.
They are doing a lot better.
I'm ecstatic.
You know, if I can get them healed over a little bit more, I'm going to get you an appointment with those transplant doctors.
There'd been 90 confirmed cases in the year and a half following the water switch. 12 people had died. Sean McElmurray had pulled together a team of 23 scientists and experts from around the state. The team says the state wouldn't authorize them to start the search for the source of the outbreak. Dr. Zervos was the infectious disease expert, and he was worried about the delay.
It was critical to start right away because by June we expected to see more cases of Legionnaire's disease and there would be more deaths, which is what we expressed in a meeting that included top leadership at MDHHS.
I remember my colleague telling him that if he didn't do that, people could die. Unfortunately, Nick Lyon's response was that, well, they have to die of something.
I mean, you're just in shock as a result of him saying that, the director of the health department.
Dr. Zervos seemed perfect. He'd stood up against the entire health system in Michigan, so I figured he'd probably be brave enough to do this study. But then a couple of years went by and still no study. I called Aaron and said, why don't we go see if we can't convince him to finally do this study?
I flew down to Michigan and we went to meet Dr. Zervos in person. We said, look, here's your opportunity. The results should be directly in line with the orthodoxy. The vaccinated kids should be healthy across the board. He could be hailed a hero for finally shutting up the anti-vaxxers. He said he's willing to do it. The study was going to use the data they literally already have in their fingertips. The data of millions of people who are already in the Henry Ford Health System database, including hundreds, maybe thousands of completely unvaccinated children, as well as obviously children who are vaccinated. What that would allow is taking that multi-million person database, segregating out the children who had been in the Henry Ford system from birth continuously for a few years. Because it's a captive HMO environment, meaning it provides the insurance and it provides the medical care, it has most of the health records for these kids, including if they go out of the Henry Ford medical system, Henry Ford, as the insurer, was still paying for it. So they had the health codes for all the medical services that these kids got. So if you segregated out those kids, now you have a cohort of children from birth for at least a few years where you knew everything about them.
I previously was a program director at Henry Ford Hospital, so I know it well. It's one of the best integrated health systems to do research.
Henry Ford receives over $90 million in annual research funding, with nearly 700 residents and fellows in 53 ACGME accredited training programs.
I think Henry Ford, like other institutions, has a bias towards the goodness of vaccines.
You can't miss it. It's a full-page letter here from Henry Ford with 56 signatures saying in bold letters, the science is clear, vaccines save lives.
If the results came back demonstrating that the battery of vaccines was associated with chronic diseases and that unvaccinated appeared healthier over time, such a result would be particularly convincing.
I'm for vaccines. I'm not, I'm obviously for vaccines, but I think it's the best way of controlling infectious diseases, which are deadly. I'm for mandatory vaccination. Henry Ford is mandatory vaccination because of me.
Henry Ford is one of about 90 healthcare systems across the United States that are working to enroll a total of 30,000 volunteers in the Moderna COV vaccine study as quickly as possible.
This is the worst pandemic of the last 100 years, and our best hope of dealing with this is by having an effective vaccine.
Henry Ford is requiring all 33,000 staff members to be fully vaccinated by September 10th, 2021.
The health system says this is consistent with its existing vaccination policy, which includes team members get the flu shot every year and stay current with other vaccinations.
It appeared to me that Henry Ford was pro-vaccine, not anti-vaccine. So I had to assume the only reason they would do this study was to prove us wrong.
Dell and I thought that was an excellent opportunity. They can do the comparison and presumably they could get it published.
We only had one request.
The ask was, whatever the outcome, you publish it. Would he stick to that if the results show that unvaccinated kids are healthier? And when he realized that if he submitted that for publication, he's going to face the wrath of his entire profession, didn't know.
This was our greatest fear. I mean, vaccines are the holy grail of modern medicine, and anyone that decides to challenge vaccines in any way are essentially considered heretics.
Vaccines are safe.
Vaccines are safe and effective.
Vaccines are safe and highly effective.
Safe and effective.
Safe and they're highly effective.
Vaccines are one of humanity's most incredible accomplishments, and they've saved millions of lives.
Childhood vaccines have prevented about 4 million deaths around the world every year.
The overwhelming majority of pediatricians in this country strongly support vaccinations.
Missing her vaccination dates.
We're not vaccinating.
The schedule as it's currently recommended is well tested.
We've studied them in so many millions of children.
Billions of people.
Decades of extensive peer-reviewed scientific studies.
Centuries of science.
The science is pretty settled.
Settled for many years now.
This idea that we're taking too many vaccines, there's really no science to back that up.
The scientific community publishes paper after paper after paper.
There is nothing to see. There's nothing to see.
I will not stand here and let conspiracy theories distract from real solutions.
Most doctors can't tolerate being called quacks or having their reputation destroyed. And I went from treating the head of the laboratory at my hospital for hypertension to becoming, somebody that was doubted on every levels after a while because of one thing that I said, which was, can we stop giving vaccines to my sick patients and give it to them on the day of discharge? And had they not tried to intimidate me, doubt me, and pushed me to research and show that what I saw was actually real, I would still be lockstep working as a regular doctor.
The Florida Department of Health, in partnership with the governor, is going to be working to end all vaccine mandates in Florida law. All of them. All of them.
My experience with discussing or disclosing harms associated with vaccines is that those are not welcome ideas or conversations.
That move from the Florida Surgeon General, a doctor there, drawing condemnation from public health experts.
Whether it's ignorance, it's stupidity, or it's malice, at the end of the day, people are going to get hurt.
He's not going to necessarily receive a warm embrace by some of the people in his profession, but that's really what courage is all about.
It's a very hostile environment, both scientifically and in the media, for individuals who reach conclusions or have opinions that counter mainstream ideas.
Every independent scientist that has ever ventured into doing a vaccinated versus unvaccinated study of any kind is immediately under assault. There's one by Dr. Anthony Mawson out of Mississippi. He did a homeschool study of about 600 kids and discovered alarming rates of allergies, ADD, ADHD, neurological disorders, and a 4-fold increased risk of autism amongst the vaccinated. As soon as the study came out, his job was under threat. In fact, I asked him if he'd be in this film, and he said, look, you can show my studies, but I have just been dragged through the coals on this. I can't take anymore. Then there's Dr. Paul Thomas.
Hey, how you guys doing? What I'm seeing on this side is a pink
dull, scarred up eardrum.
I've been a pediatrician for 35 years. I'm now retired. What I noticed in the first decade or so of my practice is kids were getting sicker and sicker. And over the next decade, as more and more patients chose not to vaccinate, I got to see the difference. But I wanted to see, could I prove it? So we got all the data from my practice. We looked at every baby born into my practice and published it in an international journal of public health. What we found, and that study was peer-reviewed, it was robust, we found massive increases. I mean, we're talking 400 to 500% more. Allergies, autoimmune conditions, neurodevelopmental issues, and then we had infections of all kinds. Massively increased in the vaccinated compared to the unvaccinated. What happened when I published that study? Within days of it being available online, I get a call from my attorney. Don't go see any patients, don't write any prescriptions, don't go into the office. Your license has been emergently suspended. You are a threat to public health.
What's today?
Today, it is the last time I will be doing clinical medicine in Oregon. Knowing that you guys are keeping it going, the heart of this place lives on.
So what if Dr. Zervos does this study and it turns out exactly the same way as the others? Would he still publish it? That was the question.
Years went by. In 2020, I was informed they had put together a study. When I had that study in my hand and I looked at it, the significance of it, it was an actual study that, when published, was the first step in changing this landscape. Weeks went by and then more time went by, and at some point, what I learned was it was not going to get submitted for publication.
Aaron called me and said they finished the study. Only one problem. They're not going to publish it. I mean, it was everything we were afraid of. I called Dr. Zervos and I said, can I fly out and meet you for dinner? And he agreed. I wanted to look Zervos in the eyes and ask him, what's so damning in this study that you're afraid to publish it? I wanted to know what was in this study. I hadn't seen it. I also imagined there's got to be a way to talk him into publishing this study. But one thing was for sure. This was my last chance. I'm going to bring hidden cameras and recording equipment so that no matter what happens at this dinner, I can prove it happened. What do you think about the study you guys have done?
It's important information because of, it did show a difference between the groups. I don't know how to.
Oh, she got it.
How to explain? I don't know how to explain it, but it's important. It was an important finding. I mean, the study was for what.
Do you find any flaws in the study? I mean, is there a way they could do the study? You can do the study better with what's there?
Not that I know.
No.
That I know.
Impact of childhood vaccination on short and long-term chronic health outcomes in children, a birth cohort study.
This one is really robust.
Let's say the results.
Yeah, what were the results?
The CDC put out a white paper on how you would look at vaccinated versus unvaccinated, and we followed it to a T.
I agree with that.
No.
You agree with that?
No,
we 100% did. We looked at this every other way and sideways.
I think this is a devastating commentary on our public health interventions, because if this is true, we are systematically making kids sick, and not just a little bit sick, very sick.
Publishing something like that, I might as well retire. I'd be finished.
I mean, I'm just curious. What in this data makes you think it will be as catastrophic to your career as you think? What was he so afraid of? The study was a bombshell.
18,468 subjects, 1,957 of them were fully unvaccinated. When comparing the health outcomes of the vaccinated versus the unvaccinated, they found an increased risk in the vaccinated of several chronic health conditions. The vaccinated subjects were over 4 times more likely to have an asthma diagnosis.
4.29 times in the adjusted. And that seems, I've looked at a lot of studies, that's 3.26 to 5.65.
They also found 3 times the risk for atopic diseases,
which is kind of a subset of allergic diseases.
They found almost 6 times risk for autoimmune disease.
The autoimmune diseases this paper looked at include thrombocytopenic purpura, rheumatoid arthritis, SLE, systemic lupus erythematosus, MS, multiple sclerosis, and Guillain-Barré syndrome. They mentioned there are over 80 different autoimmune diseases, and what their data showed for autoimmunity, 6 times increase in those who got vaccines when compared to the unvaccinated.
Which is staggering, because autoimmune disorders really represent significant morbidity and health costs and suffering, accrued over a lifetime.
Neurodevelopmental disorders.
What kind of numbers are we talking about? Do you remember?
5.5 times risk for neurodevelopmental disorders.
We know that the immune system is intimately connected with both brain development and brain functioning. And so when the immune system gets triggered by illness, potentially by vaccination, you can get neuropsychiatric symptoms, presumably related to brain inflammation and immune processes in the brain.
2.92 times the amount of motor disabilities. 4.47 times the amount of speech disorders in the vaccinated compared to the unvaccinated.
3 times the rate of developmental delay.
They found the same things I found related to allergy and autoimmunity. Also, 6 times more acute and chronic ear infections.
Interestingly, there were several health conditions where they couldn't even do this analysis because there were none in the unvaccinated group. The way that the mathematical formulas work, you can't have a 0 in any one group and be able to compare risk.
For example, there were 262 children who had ADHD in the vaccinated group. Amongst the unvaccinated group, there were 0 cases of ADHD. 0.
These ones are just mind-boggling. These conditions were not found at all in almost 2,000 unvaccinated kids. 0 brain dysfunction, 0 diabetes, 0 behavioral problems, 0 learning disabilities, 0 intellectual disabilities, 0 tics, and 0 other psychological disabilities in the unvaccinated.
I'm going to read the conclusion here. Despite this, and in contrast to our expectations, again, the author's expectations was they'd conduct the study and probably find vaccinated people a whole lot healthier than the unvaccinated, right? This is what we found. We found that exposure to vaccination was independently associated with an overall 2.5-fold increase in the likelihood of developing a chronic health condition when compared to children unexposed to vaccination.
Any vaccine, even just one, compared to none, had 2.5 times more likely to have a chronic health condition.
There were no chronic health conditions associated with an increased risk in the unexposed group. None.
What does this graph mean? Explain that to me. So it's no vaccines versus vaccines.
That's basically your likelihood of not having a chronic health condition.
They did something called time to event analysis. At 10 years, the likelihood of being free from a chronic illness was only 43% in the vaccinated group versus 83% in the unvaccinated group. It's a big difference.
So if you're unvaccinated, you stay up here above the, like was it 80% of you are going to be perfectly healthy, whereas you're dropping below the 50 percentile which is exactly what I've been stating. I've been saying 54% of America's children have a chronic illness now.
It's right there.
And that's basically what that's showing.
10 years follow-up. 57% of the vaccinated had a chronic health condition in just 10 years. That should shock everyone.
Let's remember, the entire conversation of the moment in America is the fact that 54% of our children are chronically ill. And here we are looking at the study, and it's almost exactly those numbers. 57% of the vaccinated are chronically ill, whereas only 17% of the unvaccinated.
I think because I have an interest in vaccines and I understand off-target, non-specific effects, I was sad, but I wasn't surprised.
I can tell you that these data are consistent with my greatest concerns regarding the childhood vaccination schedule. That despite the good intentions of the field of vaccinology, that is backfiring on us.
In virtually every single chronic health category, the vaccinated are doing far worse.
But there is one issue. It's the one that I have been talking about for years and puts me into the middle of this entire investigation, and that is autism. And in this study, it appears that there was no statistical significance with the vaccine-autism connection. And I wanted to know why.
Yet autism is neutral. Does that mean we're wrong about autism, Mark?
No.
No?
No. It's there are a lot of variables involved, and it's hard to control for.
When you don't have a lot of instances, as occurred here with autism, where you only have 23 instances of autism in the vaccinated group and 1 instance of autism in the unvaccinated group, that wasn't enough instances to actually be able to determine whether or not there is a statistically significant increased rate of autism.
So even though the study shows all sorts of neurodevelopmental disorders, when it comes to autism, there weren't enough children diagnosed with autism in this group to answer that question. That is why studies like this need to be replicated at even larger scales.
The fact is there's a signal, and the signal is unvaccinated kids healthy. That should be a very important positive study.
Yes.
The converse of this is kids that are vaccinated, it doesn't look so good, particularly for the neuropsychiatric disorders. Looking at the measure of association, I'm an epidemiologist, I live in this, neutral is 1. Neutral means no association is 1. If it's 2, it means there's a 2-fold risk. When we're doing non-randomized data, especially from corporate data stores, what have you, we have a higher threshold. And a good threshold to remember is 4. If there's a 4-fold increased risk in a data set, if we were to go do this somewhere else, almost certainly we would find an association when this is telling us that the risk relationship is greater than 4.
I was sitting at that dinner reading this study for the first time and thinking, oh my God, the world needs to see this study. But the more I pressed Dr. Zervos to publish it, the more excuses he had.
I think it's a good study, but it does have limitations to it. The argument against it is going to be that it's same thing, retrospective, it's not a controlled group, there's no control group, that there's other factors involved. It's a heterogeneous group of conditions. The perfect example was hydroxychloroquine.
Did I happen to mention that not only was Dr. Zervos at the center of the Flint, Michigan water crisis, he was also at the center of the hydroxychloroquine study that was done by Ford and showed a 50% reduction in death for those that received hydroxychloroquine. And for that, he got attacked by Tony Fauci and virtually everybody in mainstream media and the medical world.
The Henry Ford Hospital study that was published was a non-controlled retrospective cohort study. So that study is a flawed study.
In the PR at Henry Ford, they put a gag order on me. I couldn't talk about anything. And they said to me, Mark, so what? So you go on CNN. Which they would be happy. They'd be thrilled to have you on CNN. And, you say what you feel. But they're just going to twist what you say anyway. and make you look bad anyway. So what good is it going to do? So I should still be able to defend myself and and say what the inaccuracies are. So I'm thinking to myself, maybe the Henry Ford PR was right, is that it's just going to get twisted around anyway, make you look bad, and you get fired. So what good does it do? So what's going to happen with this one is the same thing, is that somebody's going to come back and they're going to say, the study is flawed, as opposed to looking at it in the way that it should be looked at. How about looking at this as important scientific information that can inform how the proper study should be done? Won't be taken like that. And then I can say, why? Because there's a political agenda to it.
I get it has its issues. Any retrospective study is always going to have the same problems, right? So you always have the same attacks upon it.
There are limitations to retrospective studies. That's the reason why we like to do randomized clinical trials when we can, because they don't have the same limitations. The major one that you have to worry about with retrospective studies is things that are different between the groups that you're comparing that you're unable to account for.
If you want a flawless study, do a placebo-controlled trial. Any retrospective study is going to have flaws in it. But in this study, they made a point to address many of the flaws that they found themselves.
If someone were critical of the study, I think issues that a researcher might raise would be things like the different lengths of follow-up for the groups between the children who received no vaccines and the children who received vaccines. The authors actually did do a sensitivity analysis where they limited the analysis to children who had at least a certain amount of follow-up.
When they limited the follow-up time for both the vaccinated and the unvaccinated to 1 year, it's still 2.75 times higher rate of chronic disease in the vaccinated. And when they limited it to 3 years, it's 3.38 times the rate of chronic disease in the vaccinated. And when they limit it to 5 years, it's 4 times greater. So no matter what they did to limit the follow-up time, the results of the study didn't change.
The results indicate that the different follow-up period really did not have a substantial effect on the research question that they were probing. Another concern is that there are just big differences in how likely the children who received no vaccines were to seek health care compared to the children who received vaccines. So in other words, could the differences we're finding in the study just be due to the fact that these kids were being seen less often, and so they're getting fewer diagnoses? To try and address this, they limited the population of children who didn't receive any vaccines to children who at least had some number of medical visits. And even in that sensitivity analysis, the main findings persisted.
In this study, they adjusted for confounders. Confounders can be age, socioeconomic status, gender, racial, ethnic groups, and used a technique called Cox proportional hazards, which means holding all other factors equal, what's the relationship between the factor of interest and the outcome?
Even after they were adjusted for, the effect of these characteristics was actually pretty small. I actually expected that those adjustments would have a really powerful effect, but they actually didn't. And when you do a lot of sensitivity analysis and what you're seeing doesn't change much, that can be reassuring. The authors did a good job with the information that they had. I have seen studies on vaccines published in good journals that are much weaker in quality.
Is what your study shows, is it important?
Yeah, it is important. You know who you should send it to? What I told you a while ago. Because I'm just not going to do. I'm not going to do it because I don't want to end up like Diddy or I don't want to suffer what McCullough did. But I give him credit for taking it. Standing up for it. But I'm just not going to do it. I'm not going to do that.
In any other climate, in a regular climate, you would have put this study out just as it is. Right? If we weren't in this world of censorship...
I'd put it out just how it is.
You would?
I'd put it out just how it is, yeah. I'd like to just finish out my work, doing international work. Part of my reluctance to do anything is that nothing is going to come out of it other than me losing my job, which I'd rather not see happen. I'm open to it.
We're here because I fully respect you, and I recognize the danger of. I said to you, if you do this study, I'm going to repeat it because I'm going to remember. I said, if you do the study, you're going to come under fire. You said, I don't care about that. I'm all about the data, and I'm about to retire anyway. That's literally what you said.
Yeah.
So your energy has definitely changed on that. But
energy's changing.
Let me put it this way. I put my whole career on the line because I saw an issue.
Because what?
I saw an issue that is affecting the children of America and the world. We have a serious growing problem of autoimmune disease, chronic illness. I'm not saying that vaccines are the only cause, but I'm saying this program needs some serious work. We had much better health when we were getting 10, 20 vaccines. At 54 shots with 72 doses, it is clear we are not making our children healthier. They're going the wrong direction. If there's a way to do this program better, which I believe, I've never said I'm trying to eradicate vaccines from the planet, but we are at an autism rate now of, 1 in 26, 28? We have some serious issues.
No, I actually agree with that. Is there a different way we could be doing it?
Right, but how do we get there if I finally, what are the odds? I find someone like you that has got the clout. If I can't get the study out, then what hope is there for every kid in the future? I can't do shit for them.
Unless there's a change in leadership, nothing is going to happen. Publishing one study like this one is not gonna. It's not gonna. It's actually the right thing to do. I don't want to say it's not the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do, but I just don't want to. And I don't want to say I have enough problems, but I've got enough things like that I'm already dealing with. I don't want another one.
Hold on. I just want to say this. This is the Galileo moment. I believe this changes more lives than anything there is. If we can fix this vaccine program, it doesn't just change millions of children's lives here in America, it changes worldwide. You'll be the father of the change in the system. That's historic. And I want to work with you to do that. This is why we're here.
Yeah. No, I see what you're saying.
We have an ability to do something that no one ever dreamed is possible. If it's not you, then who?
For some reason, hammering always comes towards me. No, I can't handle it. I really can't. I'm not a good person. I can't handle it. I'm not a good person, but I'm just not going to do it. I'm not going to do that. Because I've got other stuff to worry about.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, really emotional. He's just going to compartmentalize it away. I think someone could look at this and be like, it's unconscionable. How could he? And I think the way that he can is the way we all can do things that, not do things we don't want to do is we just convince ourselves, he's saying it doesn't matter. This is one study. It won't move the needle. It's too much for me. I can't. And, maybe he's right. Maybe it is too much for him.
It's very important the study sees the light of day. In the scientific literature, and for the advancement of science, we must have balance. There are always pros and cons to everything. And when we have a deep-seated religious bias in favor of vaccines, we've lost balance. And when we lose balance, the entire scientific enterprise goes off track. And when that happens, large populations are harmed.
I cannot help but ask myself the question, how many children will suffer a chronic illness that they maybe wouldn't have to suffer had this information been out there?
I treat a lot of kids with neurodevelopmental disability and neuropsychiatric illness, and their lives and their families' lives are hell. And I know so many parents who suffer all kinds of guilt. The parents who've had adverse reactions or who've witnessed neurodevelopmental regression in connection with vaccination, they are devastated. I've had so many mothers say to me, my child is like this because of me. At my hand, I did this to them.
I think we are absolutely destroying our future by destroying the overall health of our most precious asset, our children.
We need to know if this is true. We are morally and ethically obligated to replicate this study again and again and again and find out if this is accurate and if this is true. We have to.
The fact that this study hasn't been peer-reviewed and hasn't been published is extremely concerning. It's important knowledge, and other healthcare systems really do need to replicate the analysis. This question really does need to be probed. It's a very important research question.
I challenge you, yes, you the doctors, you the researchers, do the research. Find within your data set, within your system, those who are unvaccinated and compare them to the vaccinated cohort.
This is one data set. You could replicate this again. There are other captive payer systems.
Let Kaiser Permanente Southern California do it. And let the Harvard Pilgrim system in Boston do it. And all the other health systems around the country. And maybe even the CDC with the VSD. And with that, we can start actually addressing the problem that these vaccines might be causing.
If these results are valid, this is an absolute sea change in our understanding of the off-target and non-specific effects of vaccination. And we will have to reconsider the way we go about our vaccination program.
This is a cease and desist letter we received from the attorneys for Henry Ford Health. This letter leads me to believe that they really don't want us to release this film. In the letter, Henry Ford accuses us of defamation for saying that the unpublished study wasn't submitted for publication due to the results of the study. They assert that the reason the study was never submitted for publication was, quote, due to significant and serious flaws in its data and methodology, and because it did not come close to meeting the rigorous scientific standards Henry Ford Health and its researchers demand. But we just heard from Dr. Marcus Zervos, the lead author on this unpublished study and a world-leading expert on infectious disease at Henry Ford. He told me he believed the study was a good study and he would publish it just as it is. Only one problem. If he does publish it, he believes it would be the end of his career. He'd be finished. Not my words, but his. Now, even if Dr. Zervos stands by his study, does that mean it's a perfect study? Of course not. Can we say that the Henry Ford study proves that vaccines are causing the chronic disease epidemic? No, we cannot. A retrospective study does not prove causation. What we can say is that we believe it is showing a signal, a red flag waved in the air by the scientific method. Houston, there may be a real problem here. Now, this concern is heightened by the fact that this unpublished study does not stand alone. It's not an anomaly. It now stands with several other studies that have all shown similar signals. So there will certainly be attacks on the limitations of this study, which can be found in most retrospective studies, and we acknowledge those limitations. But the only way to really refute it is to do your own vaccinated versus unvaccinated study and prove us wrong. That's what I believe Dr. Zervos attempted to do and failed. But as parents watching this film right now, you have to ask yourself a very important question. Why hasn't a single health agency or major medical institution in the world been able to produce one single vaccinated versus completely unvaccinated study that shows that the vaccinated children are healthier? Wasn't that the entire purpose of the vaccine program? To make our children healthier? And although this may be an inconvenient study for anyone who said that the vaccine program was safe, there is a bright side. In every one of these studies so far, there is a group of children who are thriving, who aren't suffering from many of the ailments that plague America's children, who have barely any cases of neurodevelopmental disorders or autoimmune disease. They are living in a world that is flourishing with health because their parents went in a different direction. You now have even more data. You've been informed. What are you going to do about it? That choice is yours.
The Bible tells us in Ephesians 6:12, "For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places." I didn't choose the blessing of having children, but I have a twin sister who has 3 precious daughters. And I witnessed her wrestle with why she never questions vaccines after learning the truth about the harms they can and do cause. To quote from a recent book by criminologist Gavin DeBecker entitled Forbidden Facts, in chapter 18, Gavin writes, and I have edited this for brevity, "If I gave my child all the recommended vaccines, was that a mistake? No, it was not a mistake. Based upon the information put in front of you at that time, it was probably the obvious choice and the best decision. Most of us were never even aware there were other possibilities. There was no counter-argument about vaccines because there was no argument in the first place. Vaccination was simply one of the obvious steps, starting on the day of birth and continuing from then onward. We feed, we comfort, we protect, we vaccinate. That is early parenting, as most people know it, nearly automatic. Our decisions going forward, however, can be improved by broadened awareness. Experts have studied the topic, and parents can do the same. Just as different experts have different opinions, so are parents entitled to have different opinions. Experts are rewarded for embracing the orthodox view and punished for rejecting it. But parents are able to be more objective in their decision-making. Decisions made in the past are beyond our reach. The only decisions that matter are the ones we make from now forward." When I shared this message with some dear friends a few weeks ago, it was you, Elaine, that suggested that I added to what Gavin said here. And that is, there are many parents who were bullied by their doctors, felt immense pressure from others, and or felt coerced when they knew deep down their questioning and skepticism was warranted. In closing for my part of this presentation, George, can you put up the slide? If you would like more information, you may go to our One of His Footmen website and click on the Resources tab. A link and a QR code is included in one of your handouts. Also, we would appreciate if you would take the 8-question survey. The link is also, and QR code is also on the handout that you've received. And finally, if watching this film moved you in a deep way and you feel led, please share it with others. On your handout is a link and a QR code that will take you directly to this film. It's free to all to watch. This is how we change minds. This is how we plant the seeds of truth. And most importantly, this is how we protect our children. I'd like to introduce Stephanie Stock, who is president of Ohio Advocates for Medical Freedom and also a member here at Liberty Valley. Stephanie will provide you with a brief update on legislative action before we go to our Q&A. George, can you do next slide, please?
I think yes, I am on. I just wanted to say OAMF started in 2015, and we actually hosted screenings of the first Vax movie in 2016. And so we saw those parents, and my oldest son's name is on that bus. And when I went to DC in 2019, I wrote the names of many children on that bus for families that couldn't go to DC. And so I still cry when I watch the other Vax movies, and even in this one, and this is my second time watching it, because you think you're making the right choice. You know, you believe what you're told, and then your child comes to harm because of it, and it's very painful. And there may be people in this room tonight that even watching that think, oh my gosh, I have a grandchild that has all these problems, and is that what caused it? Or you're the mom and you said, well, I did this, and then they had an issue, and I just didn't know. And you don't know. You don't know what you know until you know it. So just try not to punish yourself if you're in that situation, and it's hard not to do as a parent, but try to give yourself forgiveness. Jesus forgave us of the biggest sin imaginable, And we have to learn to be able to figure out ourselves and move forward and fight for what's right for other children. And so educating friends and family, sharing this movie, getting legislatively active, fighting for medical freedom in this state, those are all ways that you can fight for justice and for change. So for the first bill that I'd like to, I'm gonna need my readers because I'm getting old. For the first bill I'd like to mention, it's one of our newer bills. It's HB 561, the Parental Choice Act. I think it's fitting for this because it has to do with daycares in K through 12 schools. So currently we have all 3 exemptions for children to attend daycare in K through 12, conscientious objection, which is essentially anything for your conscience. So it would be like a philosophical exemption. And then you have religious exemptions and medical exemptions. The problem is most of these schools are lying to parents, and they tell them about the mandate, but they don't tell them that they have an exemption they can take. And they're providing them with these forms saying, you know, you have to get vaccinated by such and such a date. That has carried on since the 70s when we had vaccine choice in the state. So this bill would require any of the daycares that there's inconsistency in current law that's allowing some of these daycares to get away with not accepting children with exemptions. So this law will change that. So all of the daycares will have to accept, all the licensed daycares will have to accept your child with an exemption, and all of the K through 12 schools will have to accept your child with an exemption. And not only that, they have to notify the parents that those exemptions exist. Because if you are not informed, you can't exercise a right that you don't know you have. And some children have been vaccine injured because they thought they had to get them for school, and no one is liable. So it's really important that we get that passed. It also has an enforcement pathway, so parents can report if they're not informed, or they can report if the school is not allowing their child in. That can be reported now, and then the school or the daycare will have to come into compliance with the law within 30 days, or we're taking their license or their charter. So we're not playing games anymore. These are children's lives. You can see the link up here. You can click on, or you can scan that, and it'll take you to our legislative action page for all of these bills that I'm going over. And you can do a one-click call to action. It will send an email to all of the legislators that pertain to that particular bill. HB 112 is the Conscientious Right to Refuse Act. That bill will protect all adults, college students, because obviously we didn't have any exemptions. We had nothing when COVID hit. A lot of people were under terrible mandates, and people are under mandates for other things as well. Healthcare workers have been under mandates since 2012. So it will prevent any discrimination for any reason based on your vaccination status, any not accepting a medical intervention, any drug, any mask that's not being used directly for a medical procedure, and any medical device. So any kind of a wearable device or anything that would track any of your medical, health, or financial data. I mean, you know, I don't want to get all revelations on everybody, but I think we all know what we're talking about here, and we are moving in the age of AI and technology, and it's very possible that, you know, there could be a time and a place when they say, hey, you're going to have to wear this if you want to work or exchange goods, et cetera. So we want to make sure that in Ohio we have religious freedom to be able to decline any of those things and still be able to participate in society. That bill has had sponsor testimony, but unfortunately it's being held in the Judiciary Committee. Chairman Jim Thomas and Speaker of the House Matt Huffman don't like the bill. They don't believe in religious freedom, apparently, and they're holding that. So it's going to require a lot of pressure from the public to get that bill moved. Then we have HB 12, which is the Jeff, Dave, and Angie Right to Try Act. I don't know how many people here couldn't get ivermectin, couldn't get hydroxychloroquine. That one was mentioned in the video. And others during COVID because they said that doesn't work for that, so the pharmacists refused to fill. This bill will require pharmacists to fill any drug that's FDA approved, not a controlled substance, not an abortifacient, not used for euthanasia. They have to fill it unless there's a serious side effect or, you know, it's going to cause death. Obviously, they're going to deny it if it's that, but they can't just deny you a prescription because they don't think it works. That's just not, that shouldn't be a thing. This is between you and your doctor. So it would prevent obstruction from pharmacists. And also it has a free speech provision. And you saw even in this film how many doctors have had their licenses removed or threatened. Even Dr. Tenpenny, she went through an ordeal. It was terrible. When you speak the truth, and if it's anything that's against the standard big pharma narrative, they come for you. So this bill would allow any healthcare provider to be able to engage in free scientific debate publicly, inform people if they had concerns about vaccine risks, or if they thought there was a medical intervention that was helpful and would work, and they want to get the word out about it, but that's not something that the medical board agrees with. They'd be able to at least get that message out and say, hey, here's my opinion, here's what I think. That bill moved through committee very quickly. We have had the votes to pass that bill in both committee and out of the House last June. And Speaker Matt Huffman is the one single person standing in the way of that vote. So we need to put increased pressure on him to get that moved. We had Vivek Ramaswamy, who is very likely to be our next governor. He has come out in support of the bill. So, I mean, the fact that we have a speaker that's supposed to be a Republican who's opposed to a bill that has 41 Republican bill sponsors and 1 Democrat, and enough votes to get it out of the House, and then he's ignoring the will of the people, and he's ignoring the will of the next governor, tells you the level of ego this man clearly has. So there needs to be a lot of pressure on him. And there is a companion bill in the Senate, SB 209, so it's the identical bill in the Senate, trying to put pressure on Senator McCauley, because he's going to be the LG, and he also is aware that Vivek likes this legislation and wants it passed. So next step will be also putting some pressure on him. If Huffman won't do it, then McCauley needs to do it. So really, please do that call to action. It's really, really important. And lastly, and this isn't one of our bills, but we're in support of it. HB 182 is the Safe Water Act. It will ban fluoride in public drinking water, right? Yeah. So I mean, at this point, that should be a given. It's hard to believe we're still having this debate, but the Dental Association has a very big hold in Columbus and in most legislatures around the country, which is why this has been very long going to get this done. We have proponent testimony coming out, or happening on March 4th. We'll be having 2 fluoride experts fly out for that, and their presentation is going to be absolutely amazing. I think if this bill doesn't come out, if this bill doesn't get passed after that, we may have to start banging some doors down in Columbus, because it's amazing testimony. So I hope that bill will move forward. So again, please do all these calls to action. It's so important because they have to hear from you. The more of us that come charging after them to get this done, the better. And it's primary season, don't forget. So a lot of these guys want your vote. So maybe you need to just call them up and be like, hey, I heard you have a challenger. Not all of them do, but some of them do. I might have to vote for them if you're not going to start putting pressure on the speaker to get this bill over the line. So your voice is really important. And by the way, I'm running for state rep. Might as well throw that out there too. I'm like, if you guys won't pass our bills, I guess I just got to come down there. So I'm sure they're freaking out. Matt Huffman just asked for my opponent to be endorsed. So shocker there. I think if you want to ask questions about any of the bills or anything, I'm going to do that after Sherry, because I want to make sure that all of the questions about the movie get answered first. But I'm also happy to answer any questions about legislation or anything like that as well. So Sherry, you want to come on up? Or I don't know where she's hiding out. And Sherry is an original founding member of OAMF. She set up our first training where they taught us how to be political bulldogs. So we love Sherry. Do you want to stand or sit? You can sit if you want to. Is that more comfortable to sit rather than stand the whole time? I'm really tired. Okay, why don't you sit here? I'm going to move that stand so it's not blocking people's view, and I'll go in the middle. Thank you for being here.
Well, hi. Thank you for staying. I started seeing so many people leave, and I thought, I came all the way over here to talk to empty chairs. This is going to be really hard. So thank you guys so much for staying. I appreciate it. So how many felt moved by that movie? How many felt that that was brand new information you haven't really known about before? A few, okay. How many people have felt like, how many people have actually seen the movie before? A few people have. How many people feel it's time to set up some gallows somewhere? Yeah, absolutely. That's good. Yeah, that's good. Okay.
All right, so you want me to read it to you, or do you want to read it?
Let me just do it.
Those are the order of. You want to read it out loud so they know what?
Let me read it.
Okay.
Wow. I was going to write like pages and pages. So this is about Stephanie Seneff, who had predicted that by the year 2032, the rate in autism, particularly in boys, would be 1 in 2. And we're already at the autism rate that we already have now. I need to, where's this? Not be. A rate of autism is 1 in 12 boys in California, 1 in 31 nationwide. So, and this is already a disaster. Think about all of the male-dominated industries in our country and how that's going to affect our country in another 15 years. You know, male-dominated industries that tend to be trucking, you know, plumbing, electricians, heavy industry, mechanics, cars, and things like that, and also our military. You know, Bobby Kennedy had said at an event that I was at not too long ago, where he said that 76% of the kids in America right now that are 18 years of age do not qualify to go into the military, even if they wanted to. So I created a meme that said high vaccination rates plus low infection rates equal 76% disabled children. And if our public health department, if the only thing that they think is public health is low infection rates of most of these infections like measles and mumps and rubella and pertussis that actually have life cycles in the pathogen, that they will never, ever, ever, ever be completely eradicated, even if the vaccination rate is 105%. But every time there's a little kick up here and there of measles, like there's a measles outbreak going on in South Carolina right now, and they are hysterical down there. Why is everybody so afraid of measles? How many people in here had measles when they were a kid? Yeah, and look at, all of you are alive to talk about it. All of you, really, myself included. What is measles? It's a fever, a cough, a rash, some diarrhea. In the very rare incidents of kids that have underlying autoimmune diseases, they can have brain inflammation. But for the most part, it's 7 to 10. It used to be called just an excuse to stay out of school, right? Remember that? Remember that you saw that on Leave It to Beaver and all of those different shows that they were saying, what? It's only measles. But now it's like hysteria. And it's time to stop. So what does it mean to our country? It's devastating. It's been devastating. When I first started getting into teaching about and talking about problems associated with vaccines, it's been going on 26 years ago now. It was devastating then, when the autism rate was about 1 in 150. And now we're down to 1 in 31. And in California, it's 1 in 12 boys. And that all started when they started making the vaccinations mandatory in California, and they took away their medical and religious exemptions out there. Oh gosh, isn't that just interesting? The next question is about measles. Measles outbreaks have been strategically sensationalized in the media to push through legislation against medical freedoms. Yeah. Okay, so what's the question? In the 2025, an outbreak in Texas was used to stop a bill, easing exemptions and harms and making Robbie Kennedy look stupid, which he wasn't. In December of where's the question on here? Do you see that a pathway to end this practice of deceptively using outbreaks to pass legislation against medical freedom? It will only change when public health starts to be about public health. You know, the only thing our public health departments focus on is infection rates. They don't talk about the neurodevelopmental damages that have been done. They don't talk about kids with asthma, allergies, eczema, ADD, ADHD, insulin-dependent diabetes, a long list of autoimmune diseases like they talked about in the film. They don't talk about any of that being public health.
Or how to treat anything.
Well,
They don't talk about that either.
the treatment is pharmaceutical-based, and so it's like we cause it's a Hegelian dialect, right? Problem, reaction, solution. We cause the problem because here we have the solution. We have this new line of drugs, you know, these antibody injected things that are just horrible. So it's only going to change when we can get our public health departments to start looking at overall public health. And if you have a few cases of measles or pertussis or something like that, it's like, so what? It doesn't mean that you take it's not like they play whack-a-mole with all this, a little bit of measles wax up, then they want to whack-a-mole and knock everybody down again. And it's got to stop. That is the biggest problem. It's never going to change in your physician's offices, ever. We have grandiose delusions of suddenly the whole medical profession waking up suddenly and saying, hallelujah, I get it. They're never going to do it. And if you know, Aaron Series was part of this movie, and if you haven't read his book yet, which is Vaccines, Amen, because it's a religion, and the people that promote it, like when he was talking about interviewing Stanley Plotkin, I think that Aaron Series' book is one of the best vaccine books I've ever read. And it's short, it's not very long, and I've always known that the entire vaccine industry is based on nothing but air. It's based on a belief system, because people go, I believe in vaccines. Really? When the science doesn't support it, in any of it, in any vaccine ever, all the way back to the 1920s. I just released a book a couple of weeks ago on pertussis. It's called The Pertussis Vaccines Through the Ages. And it's talking about pertussis vaccines for babies, for adolescents, for pregnant women, and for all you grandparents that your kids are saying you can't come and see your new grandbaby until you get the pertussis vaccine. You got to read this book. It's only 80 pages long. It's not real super long. It's available on our website. It's available on Amazon, because it tells you all the science about if you get a vaccine as a grandparent and you're holding your brand new grandbaby, you are more likely to infect that brand new baby than if you'd never been vaccinated ever. And I've got all the studies in there to show it. It's a little book. It's 80 pages, and I think it's got over 200 references. So it's something that you really need to do. But until we get our public health departments changed, it's never going to change. It's never going to change in the doctor's offices. You know, the OB-GYNs and the American Academy of Pediatrics are suing over wanting to maintain their own vaccination record out in the western states and in New York, because they don't want to stop giving hepatitis B at birth. You know, about a year ago, I decided I was going to stop talking about the pediatric vaccination schedule and call it what it is, the Pediatric Poisoning Program. And for adults, it's the Adult Assault Program, that they want to give you flu shots, pneumonia shots, shingle shots, and now an increased DPT vaccine. And now they're going to start wanting to vaccinate all you people that were born before 1963 with another MMR vaccine, because of course your natural infection to a measles has worn off by now. So it's an assault program. You know, it's just a way to keep us continually sick. Detox protocols, what enzymes? Does that say enzymes? Or does that say enemas?
What? Good. Well, it's not enemas, folks. It is not enemas. I think it does say enzymes. I think it does. What?
Heavy metals detox, how much?
I think they're asking you, how do you detox from vaccines?
Well, from general pediatric and the pediatric vaccine program, almost all of them have aluminum. So you want to get the aluminum out. And we really prefer a product that's called PBX. It's a spray. It's a zeolite type of spray that grabs hold of the aluminum and gets it out of your body. If it's the COVID jab, in my opinion, you can't detox from that. You know, with any of the vaccines, once you are vaccinated, you can't unvaccinate. And with the COVID jabs, that integrates into the DNA of the recipient, how do you get that out of your DNA? And so it really is, I just put together a whole presentation on that. I'm doing a presentation in Idaho in a couple weeks at a big church out there, actually. And it's a problem, because people did what they thought they were supposed to do to take care of grandma, and they believed the lie. And isn't it in Thessalonians it says that the day will come when we will send the great deception, that people will believe the lie. And they led the lie, and they surrounded themselves with people that told them what their itchy ears wanted to hear. And now people are having regrets. And it's not just you can mitigate the symptoms. You can cut down the risk of blood clots and things like that with the bromelain and quercetin and nattokinase and things like that. But removing that from your body, in my opinion, because of the lipid nanoparticles, because of the messenger RNA that they've found 2.5 years is still replicating after the last vaccine, because of the way that it was synthetically made to keep running through your ribosomes and keep making spike protein over and over and over again. And people are still getting boosters. Do you know that just at the end of last year, at the end of 2025, Moderna just got approved by our FDA, another it's called mNEXVax, little m, NEX spike, it's next spike. And it's for seniors. It's for people over the age of 65 and for people the ages of 12 to 64 that are at risk of getting a COVID vaccine. And this is to prevent you from getting COVID-19. The last time I looked at the calendar, it was 2026. Why are we preventing from a virus that came out in 2019? Every year they put new viruses in the flu shots, right? Because they think it's got to be new every year. It's the biggest scam ever, people. And until we just start saying no and just going to your doctor and looking at your doctor as a consultant, if you continue to want to see them at all, they're a consultant and they want you to get this injection and you just say, no, thank you. And if they get testy with you, think about this for a minute. If you went to a lawyer and the lawyer says, I think you should do X, Y, Z, and you go, no, I really don't want to go that route. And they say, okay, and they'll come up with something else. If you go to an accountant, they'll do the same thing. If you go get your car, take your car in for the whatever thing, and they say, well, I think you need a whole new carburetor. I don't think so. Why don't you check this? And they do. They don't just put down, they discharge you from their practice. Our medical industry is a mess, and there's no making it better until every single person stands up to that. And everybody keeps saying we need a new healthcare system. Well, they want the same healthcare system, but they want it different. It's like putting lipstick on a pig. It's not going to change. It's not going to be the same thing until it's completely different. And it only starts with standing up to these people and saying, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm just not. Can a vaccinated mother pass anything on to her newborn child? The answer is yes. That's one of the reasons why they give flu shots and pertussis vaccines and COVID shots still to pregnant women. And particularly with the pertussis, the DPT, the idea is, and when you read my book, you'll find out that they just made it up. In fact, when the CDC put together a task force to look at why pregnant women should get a pertussis vaccine, the task force said, I don't think we can do that. There's no science, there's no data, there's not even animal studies. I mean, how are we going to decide whether or not we can give this to pregnant women? And then the manufacturers said, well, wait a minute. Are we going to be, if something happens to that fetus, are we going to be protected? Because we know we're protected by the 1986 law. If we give a pertussis vaccine to a 2-year-old and something happens, they're not going to sue us. But are we protected if something happens to that fetus, like the fetal have interfetal death, interuterine death, or the baby's born with a deformity or something like that? And they said, yeah, we'll cover that. That's okay. And when they decided to, but the whole reason is so the mother is supposed to develop an antibody that goes through the placenta and is supposed to protect the baby for the first 2 months after it's out of the womb until it's old enough to be injected with the pertussis vaccine. Now, I don't know how many of you guys have held a baby that was 2 months old. They're barely like out of the womb. They're still not moving around very well, and they can't hold their head up, but yet we will inject them with the most incredible toxic stuff. There's a new hepatitis B vaccine out that has so many bad ingredients in it that when I was reading it, I was like, it's the Vaxellix, I think is how you pronounce it, or Vaxellus. And it has so many toxic ingredients in it. I just thought, this is assault with a deadly weapon. This should not be injected into any human being, let alone a young baby at 2, 4, and 6 months. It's just disgusting. See, what about safety of vaccines administered in the early 60s? They're the same vaccines. You know, up until 1985, there was only 3 vaccines that were routinely given. They stopped giving the smallpox vaccine in 1972. And from there up until 1985, there was only MMR, DPT, and polio. That was it. And they're the same formulation, the same recipe today as they were then, except for the pertussis vaccine, which in 2002 we changed from a whole cell pertussis to an acellular pertussis, which has as many side effects as the whole cell does, only not as much brain inflammation. And they still use whole cell pertussis around the world. Are correlations to mumps, what does that say? Are
4 correlate? I don't know what that
I don't know about.
Are there, maybe it's supposed to say, are there correlations to mumps?
Mumps vaccines never work, ever. I mean, ever across the country. I mean, we've had the big, cruise ships out in the Navy. They were fully vaccinated by 2 MMR vaccines, and they had this massive mumps outbreak anyways. And every time that people have gotten injected with an MMR and they want to see what their titer is to see if they need another one, the mumps vaccine is never elevated, ever. It doesn't work. It's a completely faulty vaccine and should have been gone away with years and years ago. I mean, how many people do you know in the last 20 years have had mumps? Like none. Even the unvaccinated kids, like none. And the whole big thing that they made up, which was a lie, was that if you get mumps as a young person, you're going to be sterile. You're not going to be able to have babies. Well, God always makes a backup system, right? You got two testicles, you got 2 ovaries. If something happens, you have inflammation in one, you got a backup system. And so the idea of that happening is absolutely non-existent. It was just that it was made up to encourage parents to get an MMR to their kids so their boys would grow up virile. That was what it was, just made up. It was never anything proven about any of it. Let's see. Can you comment on shots other than vaccines like vitamin K shots given to newborns? Well, there's a reason why that God made babies born with low vitamin K levels. And the reason is because when a baby is going through the birth canal, you got something this big going through a hole this big, right? So everything's got to squeeze together, their head, their shoulders, their pelvis, and if you got a big baby, they really got to squeeze to get down there. So what ends up happening during that time is there are always microscopic tears that happen in the muscles and in the organs and in the joints and all that stuff. And that's why you should never early clamp the umbilical cord, because up to 1/3 of the baby's blood is still in the placenta that needs to pump into the baby before you cut the umbilical cord. And they don't do that, they just cut it right away. And all of those stem cells that are created that are in the placenta get flushed into the baby, who just this big, this went through a hole this big to get out on the other side. And they need those stem cells that go into all those little microscopic tears into their organs and their muscles and their joints and all that stuff to immediately heal it. And when you jab that baby with a synthetic vitamin K shot and make them start the clot, the stem cells don't go into the places that they need to go. So yes, the baby will heal, but not as well and not as efficiently and not as naturally as if you would have given it all of its blood back from the placenta and not bothered with a vitamin K shot. You know, the reason they started giving vitamin K shots at birth was because there were like 7 cases of bleeding that happened in the 50s in malnourished kids that they had intracranial bleeds. And they go, well, we can stop this by giving a vitamin K shot, and that was it. And so every child gets that, and across the board. And the other reason is because when they started doing circumcisions in the hospital before they sent them home. I mean, in the Jewish faith, you know, circumcision is on the 7th day, or the 7th or the 8th day, and that's because by the 7th or 8th day, the little baby boy's liver has kicked in and started to make its own vitamin K shot, because on the 7th day, all those stem cells have all gone into the right places of where they needed to go to heal up the baby. And so, you know, God's concept of birth was perfect design. Perfect design. From the moment of conception, when that sperm and that egg came together, and it started to double and double and double, and it's got a recipe inside of it that is in perfect design. This goes first, and then this, and then this, and then this, and then this, and it goes that way for all the way for 9 months, comes into the world. And at that point where the baby transitions from inside the womb out into the world, all of these systems have to be checked off, just like a space rocket lifting off. You know, you transfer from oxygen coming through the placenta into the lungs have to breathe. The kidneys have to start functioning. The GI tract has to start functioning because food no longer comes through the placenta. It has to come through its mouth. And the eyes have to see, and they have to adjust to hearing. All these things by God's perfect design and perfect recipe were all in place to just happen. And that's a normal, non-inventional birth. That they don't say, well, you're having a little trouble with this delivery. Let's go and do a C-section because I'm going on vacation tomorrow and I got to get out of here. I don't know how many times I've heard that, more times than I can count. It's always disgusting. And and just because the baby comes out at 9 months doesn't mean it's full grown, unlike other mammals that within hours, or actually within minutes, they have to learn how to stand up, and within just a couple of hours, they need to be able to walk around and nurse and all that stuff, because if they can't do that, they put the entire tribe of elephants or whatever at risk because they have to be able to move. Well, that doesn't happen with human babies. Babies take 3 years to even learn how to walk. It's all in perfect design. It all develops in a perfect, systematic way. We don't need to inject these babies with anything. Feed them well, love them a lot, give them some natural vitamin D, get them out in the sunshine, you know, keep them away from plastics. They don't need to be injected with anything because when this baby was born, God didn't go, oh, I forgot the immune system. We must vaccinate. And that's another thing that's sort of a fallacy because parents are told the babies are born without an immune system, which is a flat out lie. You know, when you are, your entire life, you have 2 immune systems. One is called the innate immune system, the one that you're born with, that protects you from, it's by these little receptors on the surface of every organ in your body called toll-like receptors, Toll-like, toll-like receptors. They monitor for bacteria and protozoa and all sorts of things that aren't supposed to be in your body. You're born with that. So when the baby comes in, starts breathing air, gets exposed to stuff on its skin, starts eating things, the innate immune system kicks in and says, okay, I get this, I understand it, nothing foreign in here, things are working well. And then over time, the baby develops what's called an adaptive immune system. That's when the baby gets exposed to your dog and your cat and your carpet and, you know, other sorts of things, you know, that they are getting exposed to. And they learn to, their adaptive immune system learns to say, that's okay, it's not foreign, I don't need to react to that. When you're starting to vaccinate babies, actually in pre-birth, while they're still in the womb through the mother, then you vaccinate them at birth. Thankfully, we've moved out the hepatitis B for most people, but we give them RSV and vitamin K and started doing all this stuff. Then we give them with 6 vaccines at 2, 4, and 6 months. We are pushing that immune system to what's called the adaptive immune system, a Th2 dominant, which then leads to allergies, asthma, eczema, ADD, ADHD, insulin-dependent diabetes, and all those things. It's all vaccine-related. And all this gal up here that said, we need to do more studies to prove that this study's valid. How many studies do we have to do? There's another book that's out that's called, that's by Brian Hooker. It's called Vax, Unvax, Let the Science Speak. And it's a great book. And he did that book because Bobby Kennedy, this was when Bobby was still part of CHD, that Bobby called him up one day and said, Brian, I want you to see how many studies you can find that have really good controls, that they're really vax versus unvax studies. And Brian laughed and he said, well, this ought to take a weekend, because he didn't think he'd find any. Well, he found 63, where there was really a control group of unvaccinated kids versus vaccinated kids. And this book is just bar graph after bar graph after bar graph all the way through. It was actually meant to be a parent's manual of showing the vaccinated kids' health is this bad, the unvaccinated kids don't have asthma, allergies, eczema, don't have anything. And he said told me it was meant to be a bar graph, or I mean, it's meant to be a parent's manual that they could take into the pediatrician and just flip the pages and say, what about this? What about this? What about this? So these studies have all been done. And so for everybody to say, we need more studies, every time I hear it, I want to pull my hair out. When do we say, let's stop ignoring the elephant in the living room and call a spade a spade? It's all of these vaccines, all the ingredients, all the aluminum, all the rest of the stuff, the cow blood, chicken parts, dog kidney cells, monkey kidney cells, human aborted fetal cells, all these human albumin, all these foreign things that are causing all these kids to be chronically sick, all of them. Let's see, heavy metals, we already talked about that one. How do we help a child who's starting to show symptoms of vaccine abuse? You need to detox them of their heavy metals. I'd really strongly suggest, going to our website, dr10penny.com, and checking out the PBX spray. We've had 10,000 testimonials of kids that have just turned around like almost immediately. Some kids that even started talking after they started detoxing them from that. It's really good. There haven't been any really good studies recently done with the Amish community. And the Amish community always gets tagged with, they don't have any autism, and that's just really not true, because they have become very westernized in a lot of those sub-communities that they do vaccinate their kids. Would we assume that a child who is given weekly allergy shots would likely be at risk of developing behavioral psychological issues over time? Quite possibly, because what's in allergy shots is phenol, and phenol is a brain toxicant. And so it's, our office in Middleburg Heights treats kids for allergies by using muscle testing, homeopathy, and acupressure. And we can start that as young as like 2 or 3 months of age. And we treat people all the way up into their 90s with really, really good results. So if you are interested in that, at our website, it's 10pennyimc.com, and you can look up something called SRT, which is for sensitivity reduction technique, and you can learn about that. Why doesn't Kennedy and Trump fund a study through federal government? Well, there are a lot of studies. There's over 100 studies going on at the NIH right now. Again, it makes me roll my eyes. What, are we just trying to prove more of what we know? I guess we are, I don't really know. They have the resources, the media already hates them. Yep, we know that for sure. Listening to the discussion that opined of having sex before adulthood causes cervical cancer in females. If true, is this the reason for the HPV vaccine? Well, supposedly the HPV vaccine is not only for these nasty little 9-year-olds who might be having sex, because that's when they start giving the HPV vaccine at 9 years of age. I mean, these terrible little girls, and they started giving it to these nasty little boys who might be given the HPV vaccine to little girls at 9 months of age, or 9 years of age. They actually added the boys because it was doubled their market share, and the boys are really treated for venereal warts through the HPV vaccine. But they start giving it to kids at 6 months, at 9 years of age. And it's a surrogate vaccine. It's not, because they could never grow the human papillomavirus in the lab, so it's not even a real virus in the vaccine. It's done by something called a surrogate that they assume affects the cervix the same way. And almost 100% of women in some point in time in their life develops a human papillomavirus virus infection. In fact, 98% of women, because a cervix is an external organ, it's kind of like your nose. It's exposed to everything that comes in there, right? And so it's 98% of women who, let me rephrase that. Almost 100% of women at some point in their life have a human papillomavirus infection. 98% of them, it just goes away. It's like a cold in your nose. It just comes and goes. 2% of them that stay are usually there because of complications in their diet, if they're smoking, if they're low in iodine, if they have multiple sexual partners with unprotected sex because of the protein in the semen causes inflammation. There are a lot of outstanding, I do like a 2-hour presentation just on HPV because it's so nonsensical. But there's no reason for this vaccine ever to be given to a child. It's not a contagious disease. It's not like if I'm sitting next to Stephanie and I have an infection of HPV, she's going to catch it. It doesn't happen that way. So why are we doing this to 9-year-olds and 12-year-olds? Money, lots of money. What do they mean when they say vaccines shed? That happens with live viral vaccines, usually with the chickenpox or with the shingles vaccine, because those are live virus and vaccines. Measles, mumps, and rubella is also a live virus vaccine, but they really don't anywhere in the medical literature have a lot of history of them, after you get injected with an MMR, like by spreading them to other people, and that's what the shedding means. But chickenpox and shingles really do shed. And up to 3% of people, if you've had a chickenpox vaccine and you get around somebody else, about 3% of people around them, if those people are immunocompromised, can contract a chickenpox vaccine or the shingles after being around a kid that's been vaccinated with a chickenpox vaccine. Now, I remember when the chickenpox vaccine came out in 1995. I was still working full-time in the ER. And I was like, what are they doing this for? I mean, what is chickenpox? I mean, kids have, they're stay home from school for a week. It's not a big deal. How many had chickenpox when they were kids? Like everybody. And you're alive to talk about it, right? And so, and we had chickenpox parties. And you had everybody in the neighborhood that wanted to get over it at the same time, right? And we did. And when you had chickenpox, you had lifetime immunity. And how you maintained that lifetime immunity was being around other kids that got chickenpox. So when you went to church, you went to the grocery store, whatever, other kids had chickenpox, your immune system would get re-exposed to that virus, and your immune system would go, oh, I remember this. I don't need to do that again. I've been through that once before. I don't need to do that again. And that's how we maintained our lifetime long-term immunity. Well, when they started vaccinating for the chickenpox in 1995, kids stopped. What it really did was stop the transmission. So that's really what measles and chickenpox do. They don't prevent the disease. It's just if you catch the infection, it stops the transmission to the next person if they've had a vaccine within, 6 months to a year. And so chickenpox stopped being a thing. How many times have you seen anybody having chickenpox in the last 10 years? Like never. Parents are always looking around for somebody that's got chickenpox. It doesn't happen. So what happened with that? All of us in our age group, in our 60s, our immune system started to sag because we weren't exposed to chickenpox anymore. And as that immunity to chickenpox, to the varicella virus started to sag because we weren't exposed anymore, if it was dormant in your dorsal ganglion, which is a little nerve by your spine, that sometimes there's dormant viruses that stay there, it would reactivate and cause shingles. So that's how shingles got started, was by elimination of the chickenpox vaccine. And so now we are creating a vaccine to treat a problem caused by a vaccine. And the shingles vaccine doesn't work. It works less than 50% of the time if you're in your 60s, then 25% of the time if you're in your 70s, and it doesn't work at all if you're in your 80s. At all. It does nothing. It has 9 times more virus in it than a chickenpox vaccine does. So you're just injecting more virus into your system. So, what really can prevent shingles and keep that down is taking vitamin C, anywhere from 1,000 to 3,000 milligrams a day. Something called L-lysine, which is an amino acid that really stops the virus from replicating. And those are the things that you should do instead of getting a shingles vaccine. Because the shingles vaccine is part of that adult assault program, right? Okay. They've been putting fluoride in the water in Cleveland for over 70 years. After all these years, why are the downfalls of fluoride just coming out? They're not just coming out. I mean, we've been talking about the problems with this for 70 years. As long as they've been putting it in the water, we've been talking about it. The Fluoride Action Network is a great website that has hundreds of articles that have been published about the detrimental effects of fluoride to your pineal gland, to your thyroid gland, and to your whole immune system. They've been talking about this for years. It's just, and fluoride is a waste product from the aluminum industry. And so they didn't know what to do with that waste, so they said, oh, we'll just put it in the water and tell people that it's good for their teeth. And that started in the 40s, and they've never let up on that lie. What are the issues with fluoride in our water supply? Well, I just said that. We talked about the shingles vaccine.
And they're coming out to testify for the fluoride bill on the Fluoride Action Network.
Oh, good. That's great. let's see, what does that say? Do you believe this lapse in vaccine research is purposefully to reduce the population? Do you get that?
They're asking if you think it is intentionally to reduce the population.
Vaccination overall, the COVID vaccine certainly was. The pediatric poisoning schedule is to make our kids, dumb down our kids and make them chronically sick. In 2010, the Gates Foundation came out with, they called it the Decade of Vaccines from 2010 to 2020. And that's when the bigger ramp up of the schedule was, and when they started implementing all of the many of the states where they started taking away your right to refuse, the religious exemption, the philosophical exemption, and that's when they started doing that. Because what was happening during that time, about 2015, was that they were starting to report in the pediatric literature, in the American Academy of Pediatrics and the Pediatrics Journal and all that stuff, that vaccine resistance was really going up. We had reached up to 62% at points in time, and I was going, yes, because this always had to be a grassroots movement. And parents were questioning vaccines, like, I don't know that I'm anti-vaccine, but does my baby need 7 shots on the same day? Can't I just spread them out? You know, when is my baby going to come in contact with all 7 of these things at the same time? I mean, I get that maybe over the next 3 years we could spread these out, and that's considered vaccine hesitancy because you're not going with the program. And you're not doing what the CDC's software tells you to do. The thing it's called COA is a software program that shows where your pediatric schedule is on time, because some of the vaccines shouldn't be given within 30 days of that one and 2 months of that one, and it's really confusing if you get off schedule. And that's why the pediatricians kick people out of their offices, because they don't get their bonuses if 63% of their kids are not vaccinated, and they mess up their pediatric schedule programming stuff. And so they started to, so what did they do? The powers that be sat around and said, how do we stop this? I know, we'll just take away their right to refuse. And they did that starting in California with SB 277, then they did SB 276 and took away the medical exemptions. And now across the country, you know, we've got California, New York, Mississippi, West Virginia, Connecticut, Maine, you know, they're just slowly clipping away our rights. And that's got to stop too. Thankfully, thanks to this girl here, we've been able to really keep our exemptions and things going here. Really.
Yeah, they tried to hit us up.
Given what this film reveals, can any Christian or pro-life organization sincerely say they are not hypocrites? Whew, amen to that. If they do not take a stand on HB 112, which would at last allow people the right to refuse vaccines. Absolutely. I don't know how any, you know, and this is being very judgmental on my part, forgive me, but I don't know how any human being can allow their babies to be injected with that stuff, ever. When particularly, all you have to do is read a package insert. And I'll give you a little clue. We have a course that on our, it's called V course, V like vaccine, vcourses.dr10penny.com is all of our vaccine courses. And we have one, it's called How to Read a Package Insert. And I'll give you the cliff notes. On any package insert, vaccine package insert, if you go to section 11 on the package insert, it's the same on all of the inserts. So once you do it on one, you can do it on all of them. Section 11 is where all the ingredients are. And if you start reading those ingredients, how you could think that you would ever inject that poison, fetal bovine serum, cow blood, chicken parts, monkey cells, dog kidney cells, aluminum, polysorbate 80, all sorts of different types of chemicals into your child and think that was something that God wanted you to do. You know, really, people, it's time to stop. This has been a 200-year, multi-generational indoctrination that once you know what you know, you can't unknow it. And it's time to open our eyes and make it stop. Just make it stop, totally. Do I recommend taking fenbendazole with ivermectin to help fight cancer? I do. It's not my area of expertise. There are a lot of people, Dr. Mackus and Dr. Silva, who works with Graith Care. There are a lot of really great people who have really good protocols for treating cancer that include fenbendazole and ivermectin. The dosing is sort of specific to you. I always like to recommend Graith Care. It's great. It's like Faith Care, only with a G. And that comes because the gal who started the company, she has 2 daughters named Grace and Faith. And so it's graithcare.com. And they do consults, phone consults about all kinds of stuff. They are your advocates. If you're going into the hospital and you need an advocate or you know somebody who does, that's what they do. They do nationwide advocacy work against that. And they have Dr. Silva, Orlando Silva, that works for them, that does all the cancer treatments. So he uses fenbendazole and ivermectin for cancer. And I would strongly recommend that you do that, particularly if you've just gotten diagnosed with cancer. Go that route first. You could always do chemotherapy. But chemotherapy never cures hardly anybody. Some of the blood cancers, the leukemias and some of the lymphomas have a good cure rate, but not many. And what ends up happening most of the time is people go to cut, burn, and poison, surgery, radiation, and chemotherapy. And when they're on death's door and the doctors say there's nothing more we can do for you, they go, well, maybe alternative medicine can help me. When there's nothing left of your immune system to try to grab hold of to bring you forward, and then when alternative medicine doesn't save people, they blame alternative medicine, that it didn't do anything to help me. And that is the #1 reason why I have never treated cancer in my practice. First of all, because I believe if you're going to do integrative oncology, it needs to be your full-time job. You need to be really focused on that. But second of all, it's because, and it's usually not the patient that gives you the problem, it's their family members. If they would have only stuck with the chemotherapy, they'd still be alive. And so the problem is, seriously, if you or someone you know or love gets diagnosed with cancer, seek out somebody in the integrative world and do a consult with them first. Cancer is never a 5-alarm fire. I mean, when you hear cancer, everybody gets scared and kind of terrified, and they think I'm going to die like in a week, and it's not that way. By the time you've been diagnosed with cancer, that cancer has most likely been brewing normal cancer for about 7 years. The turbo cancers happen so fast that usually from the time you're diagnosed till the time you pass away is maybe 3 months. And so there's not much time in there to do any of those things. But I would still go with fenbendazole, ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, and there's a bunch of other things that they can do, IV therapies and red light therapy and all sorts of things. I'm just about out of time. There's 2 left. How does a person find out about all proposed legislation at the Ohio General Assembly?
Okay, I think, oh no, my mic's back on. Yeah, so you can go to ohioamf.org, click on the legislative initiative page. All of our current legislation that is either our legislation or legislation that we support, it's like MAHA related type legislation, and you can click on it, tells you what the bill's about. It also, there's a link to where you can sign in to do a call. You can email the representatives that are the pertinent people to contact for that bill. So that was what I mentioned before, and that's also on the QR code behind you. So you can scan that with your phone right now. It will pull up the link to the legislative action page. So that's what you got to do, is basically climb up the butts of the legislators continually. In this case, mostly just Speaker Matt Huffman. If you just called him or emailed him every day, that would be really fun. That would be very helpful. I would strongly recommend that.
And this is the last one. It says, what minerals would I suggest taking given the lack of minerals in our foods? I mean, anything is better than nothing. You know, we're missing all of the primary minerals like the calcium, magnesium, zinc, copper, that are in a good multi-mineral supplement that is just really good. And remember that in your diet, you know, people try to make diets too hard. And I really like the American Academy of what is it? It's the American Academy of Holistic Medicine, I believe. I really like what they recommend. Number 1, and Bobby's just confirmed all of this, eat real food. You know, stuff that comes out in a can, in a box, or they hand you out the window is not real food. Eat mostly fruits and vegetables, organic, or soak them in something called permanganate. I buy a little tin of it at like Middle Eastern stores. You can buy it on Amazon. It's pink. It's called permanganate. And when I get my fruits and vegetables in the house, I have a big bin like this, a big bowl. And I put all the vegetables in there, and I put just a sprinkle of this permanganate in there. It's just enough to turn the water pink, and I leave them soak for maybe 10 minutes and dry them all off, put them back in the green bags. It makes your fruits and vegetables, it kills the viruses and takes off the chemicals on them. It will extend the life of the vegetables and fruits that you bought, like lettuce and tomatoes and all those things, by more than a week. So it really saves you on your food bill, and it cleans your food. You don't, even though it says organic, you don't know what it's been exposed to from the air, right? You know, they may not be spraying stuff on it, but what comes out of the air, you have no control over, or what comes up through the groundwater, you have no control over. So, you know, eat organic, or if you can't eat as much as you can, it's always more expensive, it's worth it. But if you can buy this permanganate, just like it's spelled just like it sounds, treat your vegetables with that really helps. So eat real food, eat mostly fruits and vegetables, eat clean meat, you know, eat really clean meat, know where you're getting your meat from and your butcher and how they've done that. And lastly, and most importantly, don't eat so much. You know, your parents brought us up to clean your plate. Well, use a little plate. And then if you eat everything on your plate, you're not eating so much, and you can still say, I ate everything on my plate. So anyways, thank you guys. Thank you for that. Maybe. It depends on your machine. He asked if the reverse osmosis removed fluoride. Sometimes. There are whole water filters and underwater filters that do take out at least a large portion of it, and any of it that comes out is better than leaving all of it in. So, you know, you can take out the chlorine, fluoride, all the other stuff that's in the water, and to get a really good whole house water filter that takes out pharmaceutical drugs is really important, because think about the millions of tons of drugs that are still in our drinking water, because the water treatment plants don't have filters that take that out. And everybody's drugs that they take, doesn't matter what the drug is, if it's for blood pressure, cholesterol, thyroid, you know, whatever it is.
Don't forget abortifacients.
It all goes out through your liver and your kidneys into your toilet, and you flush it, and it goes into the water treatment plants. Billions of tons. So there are still lots of traces of drugs in your drinking water. So a really, really good quality filter that says actually on the, it's like when you read the thing and it says, what do you filter out? There are some that actually say pharmaceutical drugs. So I would look for those. Okay, thanks you guys for your patience. You have a question back there? Package inserts. So what's your question, Dal? What's your question? You won't. They throw them away. It's called a viz statement. It's called a VIS. It's called a viz statement that just tells you all the good reasons why you should vaccinate. It doesn't tell you the pros and cons. You know, the new thing that HHS is trying to do with the new vaccine schedule is they want to have what's called shared decision making. They're taking a lot of these vaccines off the mandatory schedules, and the rest of them is supposed to be shared decision making with your doctor. I fought with Bobby about this. I said, you know, that's going to cause chaos, because either the parent is going to know more than the doctor, and then that's going to cause a lot of conflict, or if the doctor knows nothing and the parent knows nothing, how do you have shared decision making about the downside of the vaccine? They just stand there and stare at each other? I mean, what does that really mean? And so it's, and the VIS statement is required by law that they have to give that to you in the pediatrics office. It's required by law that you are supposed to get that. Now, they've done all kinds of studies that shown that most pediatric offices don't even hand those out, but it's required by law that they're supposed to. And it's just a propaganda sheet, that's all it is. No, of course not. There are things that's telling you all the risk of if you don't get the vaccine, your child's gonna die. And so that brings up the other question, why do you even go to a pediatrician? But it doesn't matter, when they were younger, I know, but it's time that you don't feel guilty as a parent and say, I'm an adult in the room here and I'm not going to allow you to like talk down to me. And so this is a conversation that's really important. When do you need a pediatrician? You don't. Except if your child has an inborn error of metabolism, has a genetic problem, a congenital heart defect, has lots of genetic problems from the time that they're birthed, and then they need a pediatric specialist, not a general pediatrician that they're just there to bully you into vaccinating.
Hey guys, I want to respect Sherry's time because she just came and did this because she's wonderful. So thank you again, Sherry, for coming, because I know you have like a lot of really big events and important things to do, and I'm glad you spent time with us. Pastor Jeff, could you come up and close in prayer for us real quick? Okay, thanks.
All right, let's pray before we go. How about that? Father, we love you and we thank you for allowing us to hear these things, to have our eyes opened. As you said, he that hath an ear to hear, let him hear. We'll thank you for it in Jesus' name.
Amen. Amen. Oh my gosh, how are you doing?